Welcome, everybody. It took us a while to get filed in here. I'm glad that so many people were able to come out and show your support and ready to kind of get some information out of this. So this is being put on just by a small group of us that we've called ourselves Operation Sand. It's just a group of locals. We kind of got together with this name so that we could get some information out there about the installation of a silica sand mine in the county. So that's really what we're focused on here today. So I really just wanted to thank everybody for coming out. I also wanted to remind you that this isn't an open forum type format. It is just an informational session. So if you guys save any questions or things like that, comments until the end, and then at the end, if you find one of the committee members, which I'll introduce in a moment, then you may be able to ask us a question or something afterwards, and we can answer that to the best of our ability. Just because we want to be respectful of everybody's time so that we can get out of here in a timely manner instead of being around here for like 5 hours or so, right? So there was agendas passed out there, so if you guys are kind of wondering where we're at, you can follow along. Now we are starting a little bit late, but that's all right. We'll kind of catch up as we go. Let's get started. So NextGen Silica is seeking a permit to install a mine on 249 acres here in the county. So I've heard, and as a community member, I also have my own concerns, but we've collected a lot of these concerns and unanswered questions that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to get some more information on kind of what this could mean for our community and things like that. So our petition officially has over 3,000 signatures. So great job, everybody. Yeah. So our purpose here today is to become informed enough, and then hopefully afterwards you guys can reach out to your county commissioners and our health department board of trustees, because we are asking them to protect us by using their power to adopt a health ordinance for us. So that's really why we're here, so that we can get enough information so that we can ask them to protect us. So here's kind of the meeting overview. Like I said, we're already a few minutes late here, but I'm going to start off with Steve Jeffrey. He's an attorney, and he's going to talk about some legal issues. Then I'll come back up, and I'll mention the questions and concerns people have raised regarding public health. I'll talk a little bit about crystalline silica, what that looks like, and then we will bring somebody on with a medical perspective if they were able to make it down. And then I'll talk about some water and environmental concerns that people have questions about. We have Dr. Kim Gordon here with us today from Friends of Han Association. He has some great information for you guys. And then I'm going to also bring up some other concerns people have about transport, agriculture impacts, economic impacts. And then we have Steve Benton here is here to tell us a firsthand account about what it's like working at a silica sand mine and what that could also mean for our community here. Lastly, I'll tell you guys kind of how we can help, and then we'll hopefully be able to get out of here around 3:45, 4 o'clock. All right, so we'll try and stick to that. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our committee members. So we have Terry Belvin. You probably saw her at the door. She's waving her arm up for you. We have Lee McNeil. Where are you at, Lee? There she is. Jillian DiCiangelo, that's me. And we have Shannon Meyer. Shannon's back there. Shannon, he's going to be in charge of just trying to keep us on track, so he's going to kind of moderate, give us the signal about any, hey, we're going way over time, which we already are, so. And then we have Chris Eckenfelds on our committee. Where are you at, Chris? There he is. And then we have Sherry Mueller and Shane Kurtz and Amber Petty. So at the end, if you guys had questions or something like that, those would be your point people who you could kind of approach, and we could add your questions to kind of our slideshow and things like that as well, because we've just been, putting a lot of hours into researching this kind of stuff. So we might be the best people to kind of hopefully answer some questions or figure out who can answer them at least, right? So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Mr. Steve Jeffrey. He's going to talk about some legal issues, and he's going to go into a little bit of the research regarding this kind of stuff as well. So here is Steve.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Steve Jeffrey. As Jillian said, I'm an attorney from St. Louis. Just briefly, my background, I practiced environmental law since 1987. From 1987 to 1993, I was the chief attorney at the Department of Natural Resources in Jeff City, and have been in private practice since 1993. What I want to do is really go over, you want to go ahead and advance this, to talk about 3 topics today. And since we're running kind of late, I might skip over the last topic a bit. But first of all, I want to talk, provide some information to everyone about public health concerns with silica sand mining in general. We're going to talk about some court cases and some research studies, as Jillian said. We're also going to talk about what is the legal authority of a county commission and a county health center in the state of Missouri to enact a health ordinance dealing with public health issues. And then finally, depending on how quickly we can get through the first 2 points, talk about a proposed health ordinance for St. Genevieve County. So, as I see on TV, let's get after it. First thing we want to talk about is air quality. Then we're going to talk about water quality impacts. Next slide. What I want to do, first of all, how many people may not know a lot of information about what is silica sand and what's regular sand? For example, if you go to Lowe's or Menards or Home Depot and buy a 10-pound bag of sand to put in your kid's sandbox, that's not the kind of sand we're talking about. To provide some background from this, I have a series of quotes from a Minnesota Supreme Court case. There was some litigation in the state of Minnesota. There's also been a lot of court cases in Wisconsin because there's a lot of silica sand mining that goes on up there. This case was issued in 2020, so it's current information. And these are quotes from the court case. And I want to point out, all the information I'm putting out today, this is what Steve's opinion of something is. I have, it's just quotes from either a court case, a statute, a research study. So I'm just the messenger relaying information so you can be informed and draw your own conclusions. Okay, I think that's the fair and transparent way to be. As some background, silica sand consists of nearly 95% quartz, a hard mineral. It is used in the extraction process for drilling oil and natural gas, known as hydraulic fracturing or fracking. Before raw silica sand can be used as what's called frac sand, however, it must be processed to meet certain industry standards for purity, grain size, shape, and intactness. And although processing methods vary, the typical method involves washing, screening, filtering the raw sand using sedimentation ponds located at the mine property itself. This process requires large volumes of water, up to 6,000 gallons per minute, and chemicals called flocculants that cause the sediments to aggregate so that the desired sand particles can be collected and be removed. This leftover mixture of undesired sand, water, and flocculants is then has to be disposed of in an untreated manner. Some of the flocculants, these chemicals which are used in the cleaning process, are known hazards to human health. So that's just some background on silica sand mining in general. What I want to do is talk about air quality. There are a couple of scientific research studies that I want to provide some information about. And these are peer-reviewed studies. They're published in scientific journals. The citation is published, is displayed. If anyone wants to look it up and read it for themselves, these are all available online. The first is a 2017 study published in The Science of the Total Environment. The study was called Community Airborne Particulate Matter from Mining for Sand Uses Hydraulic Fracturing Proppant. And proppant is what they call the processed sand at a hydraulic fracturing site. Excellent. The second study is from the University of Wisconsin Department of Environmental Public Health in 2013, measurement of airborne particulates around sand mines and processing plants. Also, we're going to have some information from the Centers for Disease Control, a federal agency in Atlanta, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, controlling respirable silica dust at surface mines. And finally, this is a link to OSHA's website, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, again another federal agency, and it has a lot of information on what's called crystalline silica. Right now we're going to start. These are just some quotes from all of the studies that we just talked about. Fugitive dust from sand facilities can contain crystalline silica, which, when in the respirable size fraction, can penetrate into the distal airways and alveoli. Those are the inner portions of your lungs. And the respirable fraction, when it says PM, there's the small number 4 there. PM stands for particulate matter, and the number 4 is how big of a size these particles are. What we're talking about is crystalline silica in the size of what's called 4 microns. I don't know how many people know how large a micron is, but for example, a typical human hair is 100 microns thick. So these respirable crystalline silica particles are only 4 microns in diameter. They're almost microscopic in size. And unlike the sand you find in a sandbox, these have jagged edges. It's really like tiny, tiny shards of glass. Next slide. According to OSHA, quote, breathing in very small respirable crystalline silica particles causes multiple diseases, including silicosis, an incurable lung disease that leads to disability and death. Further, according to OSHA, quote, respirable crystalline silica also causes lung cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and kidney disease. Also, quote, exposure to respirable crystalline silica is related to the development of autoimmune disorders and cardiovascular impairment, unquote. Also, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, International Medical Organization, has classified crystalline silica as a group 1 carcinogen, and exposure to low-level crystalline silica can lead to the development of chronic silicosis, unquote. Crystalline silica, or silica dust less than 10 microgram, or 10 microns is light enough and has enough surface area to stay airborne long enough to travel beyond occupational zones. The term occupational zone means the site where mining and processing activities take place. So you have an occupational zone, and then there'll be some references to what's called non-occupational. That means essentially off the mining or processing facility property. A fraction of these smaller dust particles are also the most damaging to the lungs, unquote. There are multiple sources of these dust emissions at mining sites like this, which include construction activities, blasting activities, removal, excavation, and crushing of overburden, maintaining and managing stockpiles, loading and unloading in connection with mining operations, loading and unloading of material in connection with processing plant operations, conveyors, truck loading, truck unloading, haul roads, all types of activities. Quote, off-road haul trucks used in the mining industry typically contribute most of the total dust emissions at a mine site. And although most of the airborne dust generated from unpaved haul roads is non-respirable, up to 20% of the dust is in the respirable size range. These are a series of slides now which are going to quote from this one study done published in 2017, done by Dr. Peters and some other folks. Field and laboratory studies were conducted to evaluate the impact of proppant sand mining and processing activities on community particulate matter PM concentrations. So that's what the focus of their study was. We measured PM4, which is the very small ones of this, the respirable size, crystalline silica concentrations following NIOSH method 7500 outside of 17 residential homes located within 800 meters of the property line of facilities with active sand mining, processing, and/or transport in a county in Wisconsin. So what they're saying is, from the property line of these mining and processing facilities, they drew a line over 800 meters, which is a little less than 1/2 mile, and they set up a series of air monitors at 17 residential houses. Next slide. Crystalline silica was detected above the method detection limit on 7 of the 17 samples. Next slide. In long-term monitoring at 6 homes within 800 meters of sand mining activities, the highest daily mean PM concentrations observed were 14.5 micrograms per cubic meter for PM 2.5, an even smaller respirable size, and 37.3 micrograms per cubic meter for PM10, that is particles of at least 10 microns in size. Next slide. Short-term elevated PM concentrations occurred when wind blew over the facility. Next slide. So before we move on to this, I think, to me anyway, what the last series of slides did indicates in this study that was conducted, these 17 residential homes, a little over 40% of the homes where they had these air monitors set up, beyond, over 1/2 mile away from the property line, they were detecting quantities of crystalline silica, the known carcinogen, above detection limits. Okay, so probably as a result of the wind blowing. And I think this the multiple times I've been down to St. John County. Does the wind ever blow down here? This is a quote from one of the next studies. The exposed population in a non-occupational setting, and again, non-occupational means people who don't work at the mine, off-site activities, includes more vulnerable people, such as children and the elderly, than the workforce, which is often estimated as healthy young adult and middle-aged men in exposure risk studies. And then children breathe more deeply than adults, and their smaller body mass means that their relative exposure to pollutants is much higher. So if someone, if there's a certain amount of material to be breathed in, the overall effect of that is going to be exacerbated on small kids, because they're going to take in the same quantity as what an adult would be. That's the message point from this. Next slide. And significantly, all of these studies note that while there are federal and state standards for, generic dust emissions, there are no specific federal government standards or state of Missouri standards dealing specifically with crystalline silica dust emissions. Next slide. Let's talk a few minutes about water quality impacts. And this is a quote from a study done by the Minnesota Department of Health, published in 2009. The impacts that aggregate mining or other mineral extractive land uses may have on the quality of drinking water are a public health concern where the aquifer exhibits sensitive geologic conditions. And I think everyone would agree, St. John County, this entire, southeastern Missouri, has very distinctive, unique geologic features. Next slide. One of the things to look at as background material are really, what are the soil types in the general area down along Highway 32 north of Hawn State Park. So what you can, a couple of resources that are available for people to review include 2 publications by the Nrcs, Natural Resource Conservation Service. Who's heard of the Nrcs before? A lot of people have. The first is called the Nrcs Web Soil Survey. This is a mapping tool that they have on their internet website. It brings up, if you go, follow the links, it brings up a map of the United States. You type in a state and a county, It zooms in on that county in that particular state, and then you can zoom in and draw a box around a specific area that you want to know what are the soil conditions within that box. It's called an area of interest. And the second document that NRCS publishes, and they do this for almost every county in every state in the country, is just a soil survey. And there's a soil survey of St. Genevieve County. It's a published document. It's available publicly if anyone wants to look at it. Next slide. What this is if you see the green box, that's called that's the area of interest. In preparing this, again, if you go on the NRCS website, do a web soil survey, type in Missouri, type in St. John County, it brings up the county. You can zoom in here. You can see Highway 32 running along the lower right-hand corner, and Highway 144 coming up from the south, and just drew a box in that general vicinity. And it has a series of, I don't know how well you can see it in the back, but it has a series of lines and a series of numbers. That's NRCS's classification of the different soil types within that box, within that area of interest. Next slide. If we bore down on that information of the soil types within that area of interest, 65% of the soils were what's called Ramsey rock outcrop. And according to NRCS, those types of soils have very high runoff potential, and the depth to the water table in those soils is over 80 inches deep. And 80 inches is a little over 6.5 feet. 33% of the soils in that box are what's called lily loam soils. And NRCS notes that the depth to the water table in those soils is also greater than 80 inches, a little over 6.5 feet. And then finally, 16% of the soils in that area are called jonca, silty, loam soils, which NRCS notes has a shallower water table, generally between 24 to 38 inches below ground surface. Next slide. This may be kind of hard to see, but what this represents, the Missouri DNR has a division. It's called the Missouri Geological Survey. Their office is on Fairgrounds Road down in Rolla. And the Missouri Geological Survey, on their website, they have an online mapping tool called GeoStrat. If you see the upper left-hand corner of the map, where it says in white, GeoStrat. And what this is, it's a geologic mapping tool for a lot of information maintained by the DNR people. So what this is, again, you can zoom in on the area of the state that you want to look at, and here, it identifies on State Park. There's an arrow that points down to how Highway 32 kind of runs down through the lower right-hand corner of that map. And when you're, one of the mapping tools that they have available is it will display certain types of features. So to prepare this map, what each of those yellow dots that you see displayed on that map is some type of well that's located within that area. A well of which, the Missouri Geological Survey has records of, there's a well located here. So if you see in the area, Hahn State Park, there are a significant number of documented existing wells in the area. Next slide. So if you consider the NRCS soils information, if you consider the Missouri Geological Survey information on the number of wells in the area, and if you consider the location of the proposed facility, three questions come to mind. Is, well, if you remove at least 7 feet of overburden in the area, soils will likely encounter groundwater. Again, given the Ramsey rock outcrop soils, the lily loam soils, and the jonca silty loam soils, they all have, it's not me talking, it's the NRCS publication says that, relatively shallow groundwater table. Also, how will extraction of groundwater, again, recall, according to the description of, types of activities provided by the Minnesota Supreme Court consumed 6,000 gallons a minute in processing this material. How will extraction of groundwater and the resulting of the drawdown of the water table affect all of the wells located in that immediate area? And then finally, how will mining activities affect groundwater quality in general? These are all questions of which, at this point in time, no one knows the answer to. Next slide. So, knowing all this information, we've talked about air quality issues, we've talked about public health issues, we've talked about water quality issues, we've talked about groundwater concerns. What role does the DNR play in all of this? Well, the Missouri DNR Division of Environmental Quality has a section in it called the Land Reclamation Program, the LRP. And it appears that an application is pending in front of the Land Reclamation Program, and they've scheduled a public hearing, I think, for May the 19th. What exactly does the Land Reclamation Program do? Some people may be under the assumption that, well, whenever an application to do any type of mining activity of any kind anywhere in the state of Missouri comes in, they'll review it, they'll impose requirements, restrictions, regulatory requirements on it to deal with public health concerns, to deal with air concerns, to deal with water concerns. But really, the only issue legally that the Land Reclamation Program deals with is post-mining reclamation. That's why it's called the Land Reclamation Program. They're not concerned with what happens from when the mine opens. What they're concerned with is 50, 100 years from now, when a mine closes, what kind of fescue are they going to plant to reseed it all? And to confirm that, if you go on DNR's website and look at the page for the Land Reclamation Program, this is a quote taken from the Land Reclamation Program's website of what they do. Quote, "The department ensures beneficial restoration of mined lands to protect public health, safety, and the environment from the adverse effects of mining within the state. We administer state statutes and regulations and the Missouri Mining Commission policies and directives." And then here's where, this is the main part. This is the role that DNR plays in all this. Staff ensure Missouri's mineral resources are available for economic development, and after reclamation, the land is available for future public use. Does it say anything about protecting the air? Does it say anything about protecting the water? Does it say anything about doing anything other than reclamation after everything is done? That's what they do. Next slide. So if it looks like the DNR doesn't really have any tools at all in their toolbox to deal with these issues, does anyone? And there is. In 1946, the Missouri legislature passed a law which currently is denominated as Section 192.300. So this law has been on the books for over 70 years. It's been amended 5 or 6 different times. But what it's, in its current version, it says county commissions and county center health boards of the several counties may make and promulgate orders, ordinances, rules, or regulations respectively, as will tend to enhance the public health and prevent the entrance of infectious, contagious, communicable, or dangerous diseases into such county. So this is the legal authority of a county commission or a county health center to adopt a health ordinance or a health regulation that will enhance public health and prevent the entrance and spread of dangerous diseases such as silicosis caused by respirable crystalline silica inhalation. Next slide. There are 3 exceptions, however, to the authority of a county commission or a county health center. However, in the situation that y'all are looking at, none of those exemptions apply, okay? The first exemption is a county health ordinance can't be in conflict with any rules or regulations enforced by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services or the Missouri Department of Social Services. Significantly, neither one of those state agencies has anything to do with regulating crystal, silica, respirable emissions for public health, air quality, or water quality. So that exemption doesn't apply. The second exemption says that a county health ordinance cannot impose standards or requirements on an agricultural operation as defined in section 537.295 that are more stringent than or in conflict with essentially any rules or regulations enforced by the DNR, okay? If you look up the definition of agricultural operation in section 537.295, clearly it deals with animal production, growing crops, essentially agricultural activities. So because a mining operation is not a, quote, agricultural operation, this exemption doesn't apply. Next slide. And there's a third exemption. I'll just briefly touch on it. This third exemption was passed last year, 2021, by the legislature, and it strictly deals with COVID-19 issues. Some of it, you may have seen on TV, read in the paper, the big brouhaha in St. Louis County and in Kansas City when the local county governments there imposed mask ordinances, and you can't, more than 20 people can't congregate at a time. A lot of people got upset about that. So essentially, the third exemption says a county health ordinance can't impose any type of closure requirements, things like that, designed to prevent the spread of a, quote, contagious disease, unquote. Okay? So the third exemption clearly only applies to health orders designed to prevent the spread of contagious diseases like COVID-19 is. It's spread by germs, viruses, infectious agents, things like that. But if you recall back to a few moments ago, the silicosis, the incurable lung disease, is caused by environmental exposures to crystalline silica. Silicosis is not caused by germs or bacteria, infectious agents. Therefore, silicosis is not a contagious disease, and therefore this exemption doesn't apply either. Okay? Go back one. The authority of counties to enact these health ordinances under the statute in section 192-300, there's been a series of court decisions in Missouri all upholding the legal authority of counties to do this. The first one of these cases was decided in 2017 from the Court of Appeals in St. Louis. Just as some background information, the state of Missouri is divided into 3 regions for appellate court jurisdiction. There's a Court of Appeals in St. Louis, there's a Court of Appeals in Springfield, and there's a Court of Appeals in Kansas City. So the Court of Appeals in St. Louis in 2017 said, quote, one of the powers conferred by the state is found in section 192-300, which authorizes counties to enact ordinances that enhance public health and prevent disease. Next slide. In 2016, the Court of Appeals in Springfield decided a case upholding a health ordinance adopted by the Christian County Health Department. And the court there said, quote, revised Missouri statute section 192-300 empowers county commissions and boards of county health centers to promulgate orders and ordinances to enhance public health and combat disease, provided such enactments do not conflict with state rules or regulations, of which we talked about. There are no conflicting state rules or regulations. Next slide. In 2012, in a case, the Western District, the Court of Appeals in Kansas City, also upheld the authority of counties. Section 192-300 permits counties to make and promulgate orders, ordinances, rules, or regulations, respectively, as will tend to enhance public health and prevent the entrance of infectious, contagious, communicable, or dangerous diseases into the county. Next slide. And in 1999, this is one of the oldest decisions here. This also came from the Court of Appeals in Kansas City. Here the Court of Appeals stated, quote, "The county's inherent powers are restricted only to those which are delegated to them by the state, and those which are implied in its authority to carry out its delegated powers. Under Section 192, Lynn County, as would any other county, was given the power to make additional health rules to enhance the public health and prevent the entrance of dangerous diseases into the county," unquote. So each of the 3 Court of Appeals in the state of Missouri has upheld the legal authority of county commissions and county health departments to enact a health ordinance that would enhance public health and prevent the entrance of dangerous disease and spread of dangerous diseases. Next slide. We can skip over this. It just talks about the 3rd exemption. We've already talked about this. And I think, so, next one. Next one. So really, and I think I'm going to conclude with this slide, just since we're kind of running short on time and get us back on track. Clearly, in accordance with Section 192.300 of revised Missouri statutes, a county health ordinance can be adopted by either the St. Genevieve County Commission or the St. Genevieve County Health Department, which, although it's called a health department, really by law, it is a county health center for purposes of Section 192.300. And with that, I will pass the baton back over to Julia.
All right, thanks Steve so much for that very informative presentation. So we're going to keep moving forward. It looks like now we should be about on track with time. So I wanted to talk about some of the questions and concerns that people have submitted to us, whether it's through Facebook or going door to door, or per our last meeting, on the 23rd, we had some people fill out some questions there as well. What we did was we kind of consolidated it as best we could into some different categories, and we're just going to kind of list those things that people are thinking about. These are the things that the public are wondering about with regards to the installation of a sand mine of this type in our county. So this is how we have kind of consolidated it. So people are concerned about crystalline silica exposure, contamination of residential wells. They're wondering about silica dust being spread during transport, whether that's by truck or train through the town, because that affects, even an extended amount of people beyond just people right nearby the mine site. We're also wondering about long-term effects of children being exposed to crystalline silica during growth and development. So there's not really any current studies on that, but people are wondering, given what we do know about crystalline silica, what are the implications of then a child growing up nearby? Nearby residents with asthma, there are a few, so those people obviously have concerns for their own health. Railroad and blasting vibrations and noise impacting residents' sleep. So we all know that sleep is a big part of our overall health, and so that's why we put this one here. Stress, worsening chronic illness of some residents. So this has been a stressful time, I think, for many of us, so this was definitely a concern that some people had that are in that situation as well. So I know that Steve kind of talked about the size of these particles, so I wanted to bring some images up here of what it looks like under a microscope so you guys can kind of get a better picture in your head. So up here, it's in the top left box here, box A, it's kind of a zoomed out image here, and you can see the bar there shows you 10 microns. That's how the size it's showing you for scale. And then if we zoom in further on picture B, and we zoom in further and zoom in further, so these are the comparison of these 4 different sizes, right? So we're looking at ultrafine, submicron, respirable, and coarse. So if we're looking at the bottom box here, So in box C, this is the respirable size range that we keep referring to. And so you can see that it does have these sharp edges on there, just like little tiny respirable shards of glass. And so that's what the big concern is, and that's why this stuff can be so dangerous. So I wanted to point out, here's another image from a study here of what it kind of looks like under a microscope, that these particles, they haven't been exposed to natural gradual weathering. So you may think about sand and you're like, well, you know, it's just sand. And as Steve mentioned, this is really different. This is also especially different because it's being mined. It's not like, you know, the silica particles maybe that you would find on a beach, or sand particles you would find on a beach rather. This has not been subject to erosion by wind, water, friction, right? Nothing has kind of worn down those sharp edges, just like if you use, you know, you can imagine if you have a knife or something, the more you use it, kind of the duller it is, right? I mean, the same goes with anything that's exposed to natural weathering. So this has not, whenever it's being freshly mined, and so that's what it makes it especially dangerous as well. So I wanted to give this image because I know it's hard to think about things that you can't picture. So I thought this image kind of shows you how small we're talking here. So if you look at the fine beach sand here, there's 90 microns in diameter, and there's the human hair. So if you take a portion of the human hair, you're thinking like a piece of dust or pollen, and that is less than 10 microns. So if that helps you kind of get a better idea of how small this is and how far that could then travel given the winds that we have here in St. Genevieve County, hopefully that can help you kind of picture how far that has the potential to really move and affect neighboring properties. So next I'm going to invite up our next speaker. So we have a nurse, Greg Nemick. He's going to come up and just kind of give you a little bit of a medical perspective about this. And so I have a slide up here while he's kind of talking that you guys can think about. And this is just kind of showing you how silicosis is developed in the lungs. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Thanks, Julie. I'm a nurse, and I just retired. I worked for the VA, and I worked with a guy, Dr. Leo Warren. He was a lung specialist, and we worked together a lot. I would say that this is a good picture of the alveoli in your lungs. The alveoli is actually what you breathe in your oxygen, and your alveoli distribute it to your blood system. And if you're having problems with circulation at all, you can't heal well. These sharp objects from the silica dust damages the alveoli. You got millions of alveoli in your lungs, so it takes a long time sometimes for this to happen. But if you're my age or older, you're probably not going to worry. You'll probably die of something else first. But if you're a kid and you're exposed to this all your life, your health's going to be affected. So, and I think that probably, there's a lot of money involved in this mining operation, and money talks, and so mainly, you got to think about, what's so important, is it money, or is it your children's health? They'd be 30 years old and having lung problems. That's a long way away, but it happens. And it happened with asbestos. It happens with other things that we have no idea that's going to be a problem until it happens. Ask Monsanto. They know about that too. So I would just say that, just think about the kids and their health. I think that's the most important thing. That's a long-term problem. I'm not an expert on water or land use, but I do know about lungs, and I know that I had a father. He had lung disease from he worked at a plating company, and he breathed in it and stuff, and he made good money, and but it wasn't really worth it. He suffered a lot at the end. So I just say that that, you know, the important thing is the health. You know, you only got one life, and the health is the most important thing in your life. And, anyway, I'm just glad to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Greg. All right, so now the list of concerns kind of goes on and on. So now I'm going to talk about the things that people have sent us regarding their concerns with water. So these are other things that people have kind of sent in and are wondering, like, what about this thing? So let's get into those. There's a lot of concerns about retention pond runoff contaminating creeks and stream, both during the mining process and then even post-reclamation, because a lot of that reclamation that's in the plan, is going to be these big retention ponds. So we have concerns about that. Well water contamination. How many people have a well? Yeah, a lot of us, we all have wells around here, right? So that's a big concern about what's the impact on our wells given this. Also, impact of runoff on fish populations. How many people like to go fishing? Yeah, a lot of us like to go fishing too, right? So there's a chemical, polyacrylamide, that breaks down just from like force or heat stress or exposure to UV rays, which come from the sun. It can break down to acrylamide during processing. So there's this concern that was also raised in other places whenever these mines have been installed about, well, okay, polyacrylamide, we're using that to potentially wash the sand. I don't know what's being used to wash in this process, but historically this is what's used in other places. Well, acrylamide is a known neurotoxin, so there's a big concern about that because the EPA standards in drinking water for that is 0. So I think a lot of people are concerned, how long would that be in our water before we kind of realize or have a number for it being in there. Contamination of the water table and the aquifer that feeds St. Francis County and St. Genevieve County, which I'll talk about here in a moment. Wells drying up, because if we're dropping the water table, given the large quantities of water that will need to be used here, water table dropping, the increased cost of drilling wells, if anybody will have to drill their well deeper, so that's also things people are wondering about. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about the St. Francis Mountains groundwater province. So these are quotes from this source here. So this is from the DNR's website. Again, you can find this there. So water in this province is at greater risk of contamination than other areas in the state. These aquifers are heavily relied on for daily use as alternative water sources and are more expensive. So it's especially important for the St. Francis province that the potential pollution sources are monitored or removed. So I think that's a key point for us there. Also, this province includes parts of Iron County, Madison County, Reynolds County, St. Genevieve County, St. Francis County, Washington County, and Wayne County. So that's like 1,300 square miles. So it's one of the smallest groundwater provinces in Missouri, but it's also one of the most delicate ones as well. So here is where the proposed mine site is. You can see the little yellow pin dropped, and then if we go to the next slide, we see that here is the St. Francis Mountains groundwater province. So you can see that the mine site is sitting right atop of that groundwater province. The delicate one that I just said, that DNR on their own website, they say, hey, this one needs to be protected. It's more delicate. It's more susceptible to contamination. I also want to bring up some concerns and questions regarding the environment. This has been a big concern for people as well that have kind of submitted questions to us. So we kind of narrowed it down to these. So water contamination, deforestation, protected and endangered species loss, endemic species loss, air pollution, habitat loss for deer. Who likes hunting? Who's a deer hunter in here? We got a lot of deer hunters around here. So that's a large area of land for deer to be living. So there was a lot of concern about that as well. Noise pollution and light pollution. This has been brought up a lot as well in terms of its impact on the state parks and on nearby residents, but then also what that does to species that are living nearby and their tendency to migrate away from those types of areas. So at this time, I'm going to bring up Dr. Kim Gordon. He's the president of Friends of Han. So I'm pleased that he's here with us today. He has a lot of great information for you guys, but he will be able to introduce himself a little bit better than I can anyway.
You know, it really strikes me. I was sitting in the back room listening to the other presenters. Here we are on one of the most glorious days that we've had today, right, this year. But we're all willing to sit in this room and talk about how we can make sure that we have these kind of glorious days for the next 50 years. And that's what's remarkable to me about this entire enterprise. 50 years? The people that are perpetuating this won't even be around in 50 years. Won't be able to hold you responsible, I suppose. Friends of Han Association, we're a 501c3. We're approximately 7 years old. I've been the president for much longer than I care to admit. We are operating with what they call an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with the DNR. It's a contractual agreement. It basically says we can do these things and they need to do these things, and this is how we cooperatively work to make sure that we're protecting the park. We're strictly a volunteer organization, so if you ever want to kick around in the backwoods with us to help clear trails or clean the park up or make sure that the water is running as pristinely as it needs to be, reach out to us. We are also a member of the Missouri Parks Association, which is the MPA is the organization that kind of helps coordinate many of the Friends organizations out there. The Friends of Han Association is a volunteer organization. We're focused basically on protecting the park, and that's just about anything you can think of. It's the environment, it's the water, and because we're concerned about Han, we have to be concerned about the surrounding area because Han is not unique and sitting all by itself out there. It's impacted by everything that's going on around it. So our concern today is basically the watershed, because we're convinced that without good, clean, healthy water, nothing else can happen. The wildlife is going to be impacted. The environment's going to be impacted. Everything requires water. Everything requires clean, healthy water. But most importantly, St. Genevieve is blessed. It's sitting right in the middle of 5 natural areas. And I'll give you the definition of a natural area here in just a second, but a natural area is a big deal. It's something that we are very, very proud of because these are very unique places. And so I often tell people St. Genevieve is really one of the gems of the entire state. And I truly believe that. We've got some glorious things here. And then we also have the Horton Farm Conservation Area, which I just went over to before the meeting started today. And that is a wonderful place to take a walk, or hunt, or fish. These, from our view, are all question marks at this point because no one seems to have any real answers on what this is going to do to the watershed. But I can only imagine you dig a hole for 50 years, something's going to happen to the watershed. So we need to worry about that. Please. A natural area is defined by the Missouri Conservation Department as representing some of the best, and here's the sad point to it, and last examples of our state's original landscape. There are rare plants here, animals, geological features. Pre-settlement Native Americans saw this land much akin to the way that we see it today. Natural areas are composed of old prairies, old forests, woodlands, rare wetlands, caves. This is important stuff. And this is why I get so passionate about it, because I want us to leave this alone for your children, your grandchildren, your grandchildren's grandchildren. They've got to experience the splendor of this county and the splendor of this state. So we immediately, when we learned of this proposed operation, pulled the mapping system up and said, holy smokes, man, what are you doing here? You're going to dig a hole. Once again, we don't know how deep. And you're going to impact the water table from natural hickory canyons, Pickle Springs, probably, the conservation area, certainly, and then the 3 natural areas that are at On State Park. It's inevitable. I don't know how anyone can offer us a guarantee for 50 years that they're not going to impact some of the watersheds. So I've got a couple of slides here that I just did screenshots on. Let's go back one. Did we miss the QR code? Yeah, let's do the link. So since we've got internet access, and I'm going to have to drive here for a second, I promise you I won't make this tedious. I've got a QR code of this resource, and this is developed by the DNR. It's also on the friendsofpond.org website. You'll see Watershed Map. This is a dynamic map, and I'm going to zoom in here. I should have brought my other 24 pairs of glasses, I think. And it allows you to zoom in. I'm going to come in right on St. Genevieve. But this is a remarkable resource. Years in the making. All right. And I'm going to kick some filters on. There's a little layering system over here. All right, shut up. If when the machine's right. And natural resources land and Missouri conservation land. I'll close that up. Is the contrast in? Contrast is actually better up there than it is on this monitor. All right, and let's come over just a little bit. Zoom in another hair. All right. So 144 and 32 is up there. You can see its close proximity to the Conservation Area Department property, and then of course Pond State Park is here. These little icons we're working to improve. There are 2 water quality monitoring sites along Pickle Creek right now, and we plan to add another 4 or 5, especially if things start happening. We want to know what's happening to that creek. And if you'd like to get involved, that's not the Friends of Pond, that's the Missouri Clean Streams Organization. They would embrace anybody that would like to get trained, give you a little set of test tubes, go out and make sure that that water is not changing from year to year to year. Right now we only test the creek twice a year. We'd like to kick that up to once per quarter. So we're going to be watching this very, very closely. It's not just hearsay. We're going to use some good science. Let's see. Oh, I didn't want to zoom in. Hey, am I making you dizzy yet? Yeah, I need to right in there. This is actually, wow, cool. I live in the 21st century. It's easier than using the mouse. How come it just doesn't do what I tell it? All right, here we go. So there's the intersection. Areas of concern overall is, once again, right here, more or less, is where the mine. You see where we have a creek that runs right into Junker Creek. Junker Creek eventually makes its way all the way to the Mississippi. Of course, we're in the Mississippi watershed, right? Up here is Establishment Creek, which kind of freaks me out because nobody, I think, has said anything about what happens when that water starts hitting a residential area with its own lake up there. So I'm going to provide all of you a link to this. I encourage you to play around with it. It's remarkably informative. And besides, our tax dollars pay for it. All right, we can go on to the rest of the slides. Oh, let's go back one. Let's go back one. Yeah. We were just recently informed that when you take a look at the north section of the proposed mine, that it's not really 1.37 miles, it's about a quarter of a mile from Hickory Canyon. Who's been to Hickory Canyon recently? Oh, what a glorious place, right? We certainly don't need any of these things impacted. Okay, we can roll this in. These are screenshots. We're going to have to get past them. Okay, here is the Watershed Mat, if anybody wants to grab it, and then I'll bring it up again at the end of the presentation. But that takes you right to it. Fun to play with. I was messing around in my backyard. And then once again, on the layer list on the side, you can put county boundaries, DNR land, conservation land. I was pointing out that that's really not accurate. It's not DNR land. It's ours, right? Okay. And we can keep going. And we can. Okay, so at the end of the day, our radar kicked on really early when we started here in this proposed mine. Once again, our contention is you mess with the water, you're messing with a lot of things. If we don't have clean, pure water, and I'm going to tell you this, I believe this is Kim talking about the Friends of Pond. I believe here very shortly, based on what we're seeing happening environmentally, water is going to be a lot more precious than any sand will ever be. I'm convinced of that. But if you impact the water, you're messing with the public and their health. You're messing with 4 natural areas, which, as I said, are unique. St. Genevieve is blessed with these natural areas. You've got a conservation area that I know is fished and hunted and hiked that is going to be directly impacted. There's no way. It's only about 1,000 feet away from where this mine's going to be. And we are going to impact the wildlife, game and fish, the environment, and we will impact St. Genevieve for generations to come as the gem of the state. What really disturbs me about this is we don't know a thing. We don't know anything about abatement. Nobody said those words. I haven't heard that at all from any of these folks. I haven't heard much at all from the folks that are proposing this anyway. I don't think anyone has. Air pollution abatement, unknown. Does that mean they're not going to do it? Safety procedures and monitoring systems that were required for 50 years. How are we going to keep our eyes on this thing? I think we ought to have drones floating over for the next 50 years, watching everything they do. And then what happens when the mine fails, right? Because we know from history that there's been a number of failed mines, unfortunately, in the area. Who's going to clean it up? Taxpayers? As usual? So, the Friends of Pond Association is really tightly focused on Pond State Park, but it's not a microcosm. I think it was Einstein, no, it was John Muir that once said that if you pick up one piece of nature, the rest of nature comes with it. And so the Friends have to be concerned about this mine, absolutely. Well, one more slide. This gives you both QR codes for those of you that may have not caught the Watershed Map. You can find us on friendsofpond.org. That will take you there. And we've now dedicated our entire front page to everything that we can discover regarding this issue. And then with Jillian's gracious assistance, we're trying to stay as up to date as we possibly can with any of the current changes that are going on. So once again, thanks for joining us on an absolutely glorious day. But with all of us working hard, we'll get another 50 years of them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burton. I did want to point out, too, with the watershed map, if you guys are pulling it up, you can see how the watershed impacts, like if you live in Lake Forest or if you live in Greyhawk. Anybody here from those areas? Yeah, you can pull up, use the QR code, find the watershed map, and you can look at your lakes and the water and how that is connected to this as well, because it is connected. And this will show you how. So I'll give everybody, I see a few phones up. Let me give everybody a minute to scan those codes if you need to. All right. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit because, like I said, the concerns surrounding the installation of this mine are very widespread, and people have concerns coming from all different areas. So the next way we've kind of categorized them is regarding transport. So there was a lot of concerns about this because there was a lot of unanswered questions, like Dr. Gordon was mentioning. There's a lot we don't know. So we do have these limited sight lines on Highway 32, and there's concerns about additional truck traffic on the road causing delays and accidents, heavy traffic during school bus loading and unloading, because they load the kids right off of Highway 32 as well. Railroad crossing, halting traffic. So is the railroad going to be in action where it crosses 32? And if so, how does that impact traffic? Heavy trucks causing road damage. So how will that impact our roads, our bridges? And then who, therefore, will have to pay the burden of that financially in 10 years when the roads are wore out? Is that taxpayers? So that's a huge concern people have. Cost of fixing bridges. I touched on that already. Cost to fix the train trestle and the railroad to allow constant heavy loads. So there's been a lot of questions that people have been asking me. What about the railroads? Which direction are they going? Or what are they doing this way? So at this point, nothing publicly has really been said about how that's going to work. The train has been, the question people also have is train running frequently near residents' homes and farms. So anybody have the train tracks like almost in your yard or nearby? Yeah, how many times does a train come through a year? Maybe once or twice when there's flooding in town, but otherwise, I mean, it's nothing we've ever thought about. We're like, yeah, they're there, they're never used, it's no big deal. But now people are like, wait a minute, I have these train tracks in my yards. Is there gonna be trains full of this, dangerous sand that we just talked about going through my backyard, through my front yard, through my neighbor's yard, through my kid's yard? So that's a big question for people. That brings me to the scatter of silica dust onto properties en route. So people are concerned, what kind of trucks are they using? Will they be covered? Are there regulations on that kind of thing? A train depot for loading. So is there going to be another big mechanism also built for the train to be able to load and unload this stuff? How fast are the trains going to be going? What traffic route are these going to be using to get through town to reach the barges if that's where they're going? Tractor trailer drivers, are they going to be pulled over on 32 if it's, they're all of a sudden they're on the clock, gotta sleep, gotta pull over and sleep. Is that going to be on 32? There's not really a good place, or a truck stop or anything on 32 for those guys to go. Tractor trailers J-braking, so people are concerned with that as an aspect of noise pollution in the area too. So that's a lot of unknowns that people have expressed concerns about. This is a farming community, and traditionally it always has been, and it's a lot of people who've lived in this area for generations and hope that it continues to be passed on for generations to come. I know that's why I'm here, coming from my parents living down here, now I'm living down here, now I have an 11-month-old baby, and I hope that she'll also stay around and protect St. John County because it's an amazing place. So we have some questions regarding agriculture. People are wondering about dust accumulation on crops. What does that do to them? And not just crops that we eat, but also crops that livestock are eating. So that's why people are wondering about, well, will that affect my cattle? Does that mean they'll get bezoars? What about water contamination for, where I'm fishing or from where my livestock are drinking? What about blasting? Will that start spooking animals the first time this kind of heavy construction starts happening? Will that result in any property damage? Lastly, I wanted to mention the concerns people have sent in about the local economy. So there has been concern expressed about the loss of property values, not just in the surrounding area, but actually all along the route of transport. Reduction in tax revenue potentially then due to those lower property values, impacts on agricultural business, industrialization of a county that's been historically used for agricultural purposes, loss of tourism in the natural areas, and those natural areas that are found in Hahn State Park, like Dr. Gordon just informed us of, loss of tourism, to the wineries, loss of tourism to all of our little shops in town. We've been having a bunch of awesome little shops pop in town in the past 10 years or so. So there's a lot of little shops in there as well. So what does that do to our tourism? People are wondering about the cost of infrastructure repairs. Will that be affected? Will that impact taxpayers in 10 years? If people forget about this, then all of a sudden are we going to see an increase? There's also concerns about home foundations, and will the blasting vibration impact the nearby homes as well? So who's going to pay for those repairs? So I wanted to mention this upcoming event, but at this time, I want to mention that this is potentially tentative. So right now, it's scheduled, the public meeting with NextGen Silica and the Department of Natural Resources is set for Thursday, May 19th. The doors would open at 6. That gives everybody an hour to kind of get in there, where the meeting will start at 7. It's on a Thursday night at the Progress Sports Complex at the St. Genevieve Community Center. Now, this may be tentative, so kind of stay tuned for if this date will potentially change for any reason. So to do that, you should definitely follow Operation Sand on Facebook. You should go to friendsofpond.org. They will, I'm sure, be posting any updates on this meeting. So definitely keep an eye out for if anything changes regarding that meeting. So I wanted to mention the biggest things that you guys can do. So if anything in this presentation or any of this information touched you personally, you need to tell our county officials, because they have the power to help us, as Steve presented to you. So we need to let them know, like, hey, will you help us? Will you protect us? We need you. So let them know your concerns. I've listed some up here. Maybe some of those resonated with you. But if you shared any of those concerns, or if you have any, especially that hadn't been addressed today, what I want you to do is, take a picture of this image up here. This is your information for your county officials. This can also just be found on their website. The yellow arrows there are showing you their contact information. So this is really, honestly, the most important way that our voices can be heard on this, is that you contact them and you tell them, like, hey, I care about this. This matters to me. This matters to my neighbor. This matters to my family members. So I'm also going to bring up this slide for our county health department. This is their contact information and the members of the board of trustees there as well. So give them a call. Reach out to them also and say, hey, like, we care about this. This matters. Public health matters. And all of these things that we've talked about today, if any of that resonated with you, these are the people who can help us. And we are just, we want to stand here with open arms like, hey, help us. We're reaching out to you, so please do this for us. So if anybody needs a picture of this one. Oh, it's also in the brochure. Thanks, Sherry. It is also in the brochure, all that contact information there. So here are some ways that you can show support, because this has not been easy by any means for all of us, this group of us who have been really trying to put all this together. So if you want to show us some support, what you can do is find Operation Sand on Facebook to stay tuned for updates, and we ask that you like, share, and comment on those posts so that we can also keep people informed. You can also make a donation. So our donations, they're going to our legal fees. And then anything, if we happen to have money left over after we pay our legal fees, that's all going to be donated to the St. Genevieve Memorial Hospital. So if you're wondering what would happen to the rest if we have any left over, it's all going to be donated. So this is strictly like, we need to, we need this money to help support what we've been doing. So our Venmo, if you have a Venmo, it's at Operation Sand. So if you need to find us on Venmo, you can do that. You could also see somebody at the table at the end of the meeting, because, like I said, this has not been easy, so we really would love all the help and support that we can get. So other things you can do to raise awareness are, if you filled out the sign-in sheet, and if you haven't filled out the sign-in sheet, please do so on your way out, because on the sign-in sheet, it's just going to ask you for your name, whether or not you would like a yard sign. You can just put a check in that box, and then what your address is. And so the address is for, we'll deliver. So if you say, I want a yard sign, we're gonna, put your address in the GPS, and we'll come and stick it in your yard for you, like easy peasy, okay? So if you did not fill out that, little sign-in sheet on your way in, make sure to hit it on your way out, because if you want to sign, hey, we'll get you one. We have more, we'll have more on order, so as we get them in, we'll come and stick them in your yard. T-shirts, we have them for sale back there, I think for $15 a piece. So again, all of the proceeds for that would go to help us out in our cause, which is, and then like I said, the remainder would be donated. We have flyers and brochures, so take one for yourself and take a few extra for your friends and families who couldn't make it today. So that's what I want you guys to do as well. So now, I know that we did some 50-50 tickets, so let's do our 50-50 drawing as well, and I'll leave this slide up here for a moment. Oh, do we want to do a last call for 50-50 first? Okay, yeah, let's do a last call for 50-50. And then I'll go ahead and I'll post our email addresses up here as well. So you guys can reach out to us at operationsandllc@gmail.com. So go ahead and get some 50-50 tickets, and then we'll do a drawing here in a few minutes.